Hey everyone, Christy Wimber here. Just wanted to take a few moments to encourage us. And I really wanted to talk about this because I think it's important. But I want to give us 4 different things about avoiding burnout. And I kind of actually don't even like the whole theme of avoiding burnout, because I think when you get to burnout, you've already kind of past the point of where you don't want to be. But we have obviously been in a tough season. I have myself encountered, burnout a few times throughout the years. I think that's kind of normal for any leader, where you kind of learn. And I hate even the word balance. You have to find a rhythm for your own life. And I think that's, it's kind of normal, where you kind of, sometimes you have to learn things the hard way. Hopefully I'm older now and I'm learning it where I don't have to go through hard things to learn things. But I remember when COVID hit and I had posted something where I'd said, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And that is the reality of what we have lived with these last few years. That's the reality. I think that, that we are all in the same storm, but lots of times, we don't have the same equipment, so to speak. We don't have the same boat. Like lots of people, their boat is leaking and their boat is struggling, and financially, emotionally, spiritually. And I know that is the reality for so many of you watching, where and you feel like, I am about to burn out. Like I'm exhausted. So I just want to give us a few things here. One is, I think it's very important that you actually stick and know your values. Stick to your values, know your values, because one of the things that happens, especially if you are a leader, is that you get pulled into all kinds of different things, and you have to know what your values are. You have to know what your values are because your priorities come from your values. And we live our life where our priorities actually come from the place of what we think is most important. Isn't that true? Like we prioritize what is important. So you have to know what your values are so you don't get pulled into a direction that you're not called to. And the second thing is that you need to know that the season that you're in, that this is what God's called you to do. So how many know as a leader, it's not just getting pulled into things, it's feeling responsible for so many different things. But is it God? Is it God's best for you? So obviously, when you're leading stuff, you have to do things that you don't like. I mean, that's the reality of life. But is what you're doing what God has asked you to do, the core of it? Because if it's not, you will not have grace that you need in order to walk out wherever it is that God has you. And so I personally am a big believer of a few things. One is that you have to write down the things that God has said to you. Habakkuk 3 talks about that we write down the vision so that we can run with it. And how many know if we actually don't write it down, we forget? So I'm a big believer that you write down the things that God has said over your life and what you're supposed to be doing right now, so that you can refer back to those things. So one, we know our values, so our priorities are set straight, but also that we are doing what it is that God has asked us to do. The majority of that, we're not getting pulled into so many different things. The third thing is about having, I think, grace in the season of what God has us in. And so even though we're all in this massive season of being in a big storm together, each and every one of us have other storms of life as well. And we're all living different seasons of life, and we serve a God of seasons. That's what the book of Ecclesiastes is all about. How many are glad that we don't always live in winter? We serve a God of seasons. But one of the things that I found, especially when it comes to leadership, is that so many people burn out because they haven't recognized that the season has changed. And one of the things that I've learned is a lot of people will hold on to a season. In other words, they'll hold on to a ministry, they'll hold on to something that they're leading because they're so afraid to let go. Like they're so afraid that they're not going to have something if they do let go, or if they do move on. And that's a sign that, honestly, that the identity is wrapped up in what they're doing rather than calling. Because when God calls, he calls us in seasons, and seasons change and things do change. And I'll just tell you this, ministry changes, influence changes, where you have a voice changes. And it's a kind of a hard reality that leaders often will never think will happen to them. And I'm going to tell you that will happen to you, where your voice, wherever you have influence today, it will change tomorrow. That's the reality of it. That's why your identity can't be in it. We serve a God of seasons. Just look at like what was popular 30 years ago compared to what's popular 20 years ago. And then today, like it just evolves, it changes. And the same thing with leadership. God calls us and he calls us in seasons, and those seasons change. And there's nothing sad. I'm telling you, this is a sad thing, I think, especially in church leadership, where the season is changed, but nobody wants to say it to the leader because they're afraid of the leader and the leader's response. And here somebody has outstayed their welcome. And when you outstay your welcome, you lose the grace in that season. And that is a really important thing, especially when we're talking about burnout. A lot of people burn out because you've stayed past your expiration date. I know that sounds harsh, but I've been there. And it's something that's normal, that we need to know that seasons are normal. I realize that we don't like change, but you don't want to stay in something where God has actually kind of like moved you on. And we also, in the church, aren't we supposed to actually invite the younger people in and give other people a chance? I mean, that's what we're called to, right? So letting go, we're not necessarily good at letting go. Burnout is a result of holding on to things past the expiration date. And burnout is a result of staying too long when God is trying to move you on and you're holding on with everything that's in you. I'm telling you, so many people burn out for that reason. You have grace for the season that you're in. You have grace for today. That's God's promise to us. I'm going to tell you, this is really, this almost sounds very unpastoral, but I've always said I'm not really a great pastor. I can do it, but it's not my main gift. But here's the thing about ministry. The ministry will not care for you once you're gone. The ministry is not going to actually be there when the seasons change. I mean, ministry does come and ministry does go. And if your identity is in that, you will burn out because you will do whatever you can to keep it together. And here's what I've learned throughout the years with when it comes to ministry. Whatever I build in my own power, I have to maintain. And whatever I have to maintain, that will burn me out. So you have to know the grace of what you have for the season that you're in. The fourth thing is that the insides of who you are have to be bigger than your outside responsibility. In other words, you have got to work on and spend time with God to work on the inner parts of who you are. I don't believe that it is the anointing of God that takes leaders out. I believe that it's the insides of leaders that takes leaders out. It's their own choices. It's not the anointing. It wasn't the heaviness of the anointing. It was the inward part of who that person was that they just imploded. And I have learned, I mean, I've been through tough seasons, and I have burned out, and I have felt like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I don't even want to do this. And I have to look like, am I even doing what my values are? Am I doing what God's called me to be? Like, even seasons where it's hard to hear God's voice. I mean, that's burnout, I think. And that's just being weary. And knowing the season that we're to be in is really important. But this last thing of investing internally, like I've had to draw from a well within me that I didn't even know was there. And if I did not invest in myself in ways all the years prior of my personal disciplines, my secret history with the Lord, so to speak, I would have nothing to draw on this last season. That's how hard it's been for me in so many different ways. I'm still there in some of it, to be honest. I mean, I've obviously come out the other side. I'm still here. That's how I say the other side. But man, I'm telling you, I had to draw from, I didn't even know what was really in me until this time came. And so you have to invest internally. Whatever you feed yourself is what's feeding the people around you as well. But lots of people actually don't finish well because they haven't spent the amount of time needed to invest internally into their soul. Psalm 1:3 talks about plant yourself, root yourself, because that's from the place of where we grow. That's from the place of where we prosper. That's from the place of where God leads us, where he comforts us, where he stills us. But it's also that promise of being planted and growth. You've got to plant yourself in the Lord and have the internal part of who you are be bigger than your outside responsibility, so you don't explode or implode, because that's, no one's above that. So, I know that so many are hurting and tired and weary. You're not crazy, but you've got to have some things in place. And this is just 4 things. There's so many things that I could talk about. But for today, if you write down these things, I have lived by these values, and I think it's so important, and I'm still here. And that's the remarkable part of the testimony, is that I love Jesus. I love my family. I love my friends. I love the church. How many know? Maybe that was the one that was hard. I love the church. As messed up as she can be, I love the church. And so, invest in yourself. Love yourself. Here's the thing. Be kind to yourself. And thanks for being with me today. And I pray that you are encouraged. And if you are feeling tired and weary, just know that God is the God who meets us wherever we're at.